Deborah Bateson. I'm a primary care clinician by background. I was actually born in England, but I live and work in Sydney, but I also work in the Indo-Pacific region. So I do a lot of work around implementation of cervical cancer control and prevention initiatives, particularly in Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to hand this to you now, Daniela.
Hi everyone, I am Daniela Iacobone from Italy. I'm a clinician, I'm a gynecologist working at the preventive gynecology unit of the European Institute of Oncology in Milan. And I'm involved in a lot of clinician research about self-sampling, management and follow-up of women affected by HPV-related disease.
Hi everyone, my name is Alton Gayton. I am a 6th year PhD student in the Harvard Virology program. My research interests mainly focus on kind of two key parts. One, designing a therapeutic HPV T-cell vaccine aimed at not just treating cervical cancer, but hopefully preventing progression to cervical cancer. And the second part is starting to understand different correlates of the immune response that are associated with successful clearance of cervical HPV infection. One of the talks that I went to today was focused around AI use and how we can start to implement that and how we kind of approach treating patients with cervical HPV infection as well as cervical cancer to kind of identify risks associated with worse disease outcomes. There are a couple of points that really stood out. One of the kind of key controversial takes was actually around the patient's data and confidentiality there. One of the kind of burning questions, or two of the burning questions, was one, how do we ensure that there's the best quality data going into the models so that we get the best quality data coming out? There's a quote that the CEO of, I think, PyCon said, if you put in, trash into the model, you're going to get really expensive trash coming out of the model. And obviously, if you have those those models that aren't predicting as well, you could get false positives with patient outcomes, which are bad, but then the false negatives are arguably worse. And then the second kind of main talking point was around the patient confidentiality and data, and that was related to, if a patient, no longer consents their data being used in the models, well then, how do you get that data out if the model has already been trained?
I also attended the same session, and as a clinician, I was really inspired by this session because I'm excited about the idea how we can use AI models for risk management, risk stratification, patient management, even if maybe some clinicians could be scared and worried about the future use. They will replace us, we don't know, but it's really inspiring. But I also learned that we need more data because data sets should be completely validated across international populations. I also attended this morning the session, the Special Interest Satellite Symposium on how vaginal microbiome could influence HPV infection, persistence, regression, or progression to cervical cancer. And it's really useful because we really need to understand why some cervical lesions regress while others progress, which factors may affect vaginal microbiome, and which could be the useful tools for precision medicine, novel interventions to change microbiome. What do you think about Deborah?
No, thank you, Daniela. I think, a couple of things. So first of all, I realised I forgot to say that I'm at the University of Sydney at a new centre, actually. It's the Cancer Elimination Collaboration. So I think I'm thinking about the intersection of both the AI and the vaginal microbiome, because obviously there's lots of potential there. So just to come back to the AI first, I think one key thing is that we must always be mindful of whatever we're doing really, but that we don't increase inequities and that we use it, and we're mindful to make sure that we're actually using fantastic new technologies, which obviously depends on collecting all that data. And as you quite rightly say, you know, Alton, that we need to make sure we've got good quality data going in. And sometimes as a clinician, I know a lot of AI can be looking at the cervix, for instance, and it will depend on photos taken of the cervix, which could be poor quality photos. But again, just the data from one part, I work in the Pacific, one island, one country in the Pacific may be quite different to other parts. But I think it's just paying attention to that equity and ensuring that we're not widening gaps. But coming back to the vagina microbiome, I think it's amazing, because we know the microbiome is so important for so many things. In my world, I think about it in terms of bacterial vaginosis and premature deliveries, but also, of course, around HPV infection and being able to have a way to predict, but then particularly a way to actually treat or manage to prevent progression, for instance. I mean, I think there's a whole new world ahead of us, so I think it's very exciting. Maybe I was going to just introduce something, but I'm going to hand back to you, Daniela.
I totally agree with you, because I don't know if you followed the session with the clinical abstracts, and it was a really interesting presentation by a researcher from Cambridge that he highlights the role of basal reserve cells that are regulating immune systems, and the vaginal microbiome plays a key role even in immune system. So we'll see more and more in future years, and I'm really excited. I hope to meet all of you in Athens next year.
That would be nice. I wanted to kind of go back to the point that you brought up about the inequities, because there was a stat at the talk today that was, 16% of the world's population being Caucasian individuals make up, I think it was like 82% of the data that we know around kind of the biopsies and clinical progression of cervical cancer. And to that point, the inequities there are very important to address. So you have to start to collect the data from the underrepresented areas, and especially with AI use, the energy expenditures, the potential pollution that comes as a result, that also can introduce a completely additional layer of inequities.
I think these are really important points, and I agree with you that we look forward to seeing everyone in Athens next year, because we'll have been, there'll be new evidence, new research will have come out. And again, from my interest, I suppose the one key thing that I thought about this morning, there was a session on scale-up, implementation and scale-up and sustainability of, across the three pillars of HPV vaccination and screening, and also the challenging one sometimes of treatment. And there can be a lot of inequities, expensive equipment, a lot of health dollars spent on expensive overseas transfers, but how we can work together to think about that sustainability. And I think the key thing that I took away was just the importance of cost effectiveness and modelling, financial modelling, and ensuring that governments can actually build in the sort of that finance budget into their budget cycle. So actually, it's not always dependent on donor funding. So that was a key thing for me. So over to you, Daniela. Yeah.
And this is why we really need the three pillars of our society, that is basic science, public health, and clinical science. So I think that we can come back home with a lot of lights, exciting ideas, and future projects. So thank you, everyone, for coming, for joining us, and it was a really great experience to meet you, Deborah and Alton, here in Bangkok. Thank you.
Thank you.